Imagine checking your bank account and actually smiling instead of closing the app in horror. You stop calculating whether you can afford coffee or if groceries mean eating ramen all week.
There is a specific number where this shift happens, and it is not what most people think.
Most financial gurus say you need $1 million or 6 figures to feel truly wealthy. But there is a much smaller milestone that completely transforms your relationship with money forever.
Once you hit this number, everything changes. That transformative number is exactly $20,000.
My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money and financial psychology. I study why some people effortlessly build wealth, while others stay stuck in the same patterns for decades. If you want to understand the real mechanics of wealth building, hit subscribe and thumbs up now. Before we dive in, what comes to mind when you think about building wealth from scratch? Maybe you picture a trust fund kid who never had to worry about money a single day. Or maybe you imagine someone grinding away for years, slowly accumulating wealth $1 at a time. The truth is, wealth building does not work the way most people imagine. It does it all.
There are certain financial thresholds that act like invisible barriers in the wealth building game.
Once you cross these thresholds, the entire rules of the financial game completely change for you. The $20,000 mark is the very first major threshold that separates future wealth builders from everyone else. This threshold separates those who build significant wealth from those who live paycheck to paycheck forever. The crazy part is, most people have absolutely no idea this $20,000 threshold even exists. Think about pushing a heavy boulder up a hill. Getting it started is always the hardest part. You are straining, sweating, making very little progress, and questioning whether it is even possible. But once you build enough momentum, something magical happens. The boulder starts moving faster on its own. When you reach the top, the boulder rolls down the other side almost completely effortlessly. $20,000 is that turning point where your financial boulder finally crests the hill. Everything before $20,000 feels like you are pushing uphill against gravity the entire time. Everything after $20,000 feels like gravity is now finally working directly in your favor. But here is where it gets really interesting. The difference is not just mathematical at all. It is not simply that you have more money to invest, or that your returns are larger. The real magic happens in your brain. This is the psychological shift that changes absolutely everything. When you have no savings, your brain operates in what psychologists call survival mode, constantly. Every financial decision gets filtered through fear and scarcity when you are living without savings. You take the very first job offer, even if it is terrible, because you cannot afford to be picky. You stay in situations you absolutely hate because leaving feels financially too risky to consider. You say yes to things you do not want to do simply because you desperately need the money. This is not just about being practical, say. In survival mode, your brain literally cannot think about growth. It is like trying to plan a vacation while your house is actually on fire right now. Your mental bandwidth is completely consumed by immediate threats and short-term survival, with no savings. But something remarkable happens the moment you cross that $20,000 savings threshold, finally. Suddenly your brain has space to think differently, and ask completely new kinds of financial questions. Instead of asking, "How do I survive until next paycheck?" you ask, "How can I grow this money?" Instead of reacting to financial crises, you become proactive about deliberately building lasting wealth. Research from Vanguard shows that having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases well-being by 21%. $2,000 tech at bank. That is less than most people spend on a single vacation or a laptop. That small buffer creates a massive psychological shift, moving you completely out of pure survival mode. Pushing your emergency fund to 3 to 6 months of expenses lands most people around $20,000.
You get another 13% boost in financial well-being when you hit that full emergency fund target.
More importantly, you now have breathing room for your brain to think about building wealth, not just preserving it. Here is where the math gets exciting. Imagine saving $1,000 every month at 8% return. Getting to your first $20,000 takes about 19 months of consistent saving and investing. That is a year and a half of real discipline, real sacrifice, and genuine delayed gratification every day. It is honestly not easy, and most people give up somewhere along the way before reaching it. But here is the part that will blow your mind. Your second $20,000 does not take 19 months. Your second $20,000 only takes about 17 months, 2 full months faster than the first one. Why? Because now you have that first $20,000 working alongside your monthly contributions, generating its own returns.
You did the exact same amount of work, saved the same monthly amount, took the same investment risk.
But you shaved 2 full months off the timeline just because more money was working for you. That is the power of compound interest starting to kick in and work in your favor. By the time you are going for your third $20,000, the timeline shrinks even more dramatically. Your money is doing an increasing share of the heavy lifting, while you put in the same effort. When you get to the really big numbers, the acceleration of wealth building becomes almost comical. Once you hit $400,000 in your portfolio, you generate your next $20,000 in just 5 months. The same amount that took nearly 2 years to save initially is now happening automatically through your investments. That first milestone feels nearly impossible, but every single milestone after it gets progressively and noticeably easier. You might think wealthy people have access to a secret investment world that regular people simply cannot touch. Like exclusive hedge funds or special opportunities that only unlock once you reach certain wealth levels. While there is some truth at the ultra-high end, it is not what drives the 20,000 phenomenon.
The real secret is much simpler and honestly much more encouraging to make it done. It is just basic mathematics.
When you invest $1,000 and it grows 10% in a year, you make $100. Take that same 10% growth and apply it to $10,000 coup. Suddenly you have $1,000 profit.
This is exactly why hitting 20,000 feels like such a major turning point in your wealth journey.
Before 20,000, your investment returns feel almost insignificant because you are working with smaller amounts. A 10% return on $2,000 is $200. Nice, but not exactly life-changing. But a 10% return on $20,000 is $2,000. Now we are talking real money. When you have $20,000 in investments earning 8% annually, that is $1,600 flowing in passively. That is money you did not have to earn through your job briefing. Money that just appeared for you.
Money showing up because your existing money was working hard on your behalf behind the scenes.
The investment strategy is not any more sophisticated than what someone with just 1,000 can use.
You can buy the exact same index funds, use the same brokerages, and follow the same basic principles.
The only difference is scale hub, and that scale transforms small percentage wins into real, meaningful financial progress. But here is what most people completely miss on, and this might actually be the most important point today.
When you save $20,000, you have accomplished something far more valuable than just accumulating money.
You have fundamentally rewired your brain and built the single most important financial habit you will ever develop. This might sound like self-help nonsense, but stick with me because this is where things get very practical.
Think about what it actually takes to save $20,000 if you are starting completely from zero. Unless you are making ridiculous money or living rent-free in your parents' basement, this requires serious discipline. You had to track where every single dollar was going, month after month, without exception. You had to say no to things you really wanted so you could consistently set money aside instead. You had to resist the urge to blow your savings on every shiny object that caught your attention. Most importantly, you had to do all of this consistently for months or even years without stopping.
You prove to yourself that you can control your money instead of letting your money control you.
You became the type of person who can truly delay gratification when it really and seriously matters. That is not just a financial skill, Buffett. That is a genuine life skill that pays dividends everywhere. This identity shift is huge because it now affects every single financial decision you make going forward.
Before you had $20,000 saved, buying a $4 coffee required real mental gymnastics about affording it.
After you hit 20,000, you stop sweating the small stuff because you have your priorities straight.
You have proven you can make the big sacrifices when they truly matter, so small stuff is irrelevant. There is another psychological shift that happens at this level that most people simply do not talk about.
You start seeing opportunities instead of just threats everywhere you look in your financial world.
When you are living paycheck to paycheck, every unexpected expense feels like an absolute financial disaster.
Your car needs repairs, your laptop dies, your rent goes up coast-fing. These derail your entire month completely.
But when you have 20,000 in the bank, these same events become minor inconveniences at worst.
Car needs repairs? Annoying, but not catastrophic. Laptop dies? Time to actually upgrade to something better. Rent goes up? Maybe it is finally time to find a better place or negotiate your salary upward.
Even better, you start noticing opportunities that were always there, but you simply could not take advantage of before.
Your friend mentions starting a business and looking for investors. Before, you would have just thought, that is interesting. Now you can actually consider whether it is worth investing $5,000 into that friend's business idea. A killer deal on a rental property that needs work pops up. Before, you would just scroll past it. Now you can actually run the real numbers and see if that rental property makes sense as an investment.
Your boss mentions a career conference in another city, and the company will not pay for that. Before, you make excuses.
Now you can actually weigh the potential return on investing in your own career development and growth.
This is exactly what wealthy people mean when they say, money goes to money. Trafe. It is not conspiracy.
Having money gives you real options, and those options create more opportunities to make even more money. Here is something else that happens around 20,000 that will make you question everything about budgeting.
You start caring less about small expenses and more about big ones. Right in. And yes, this sounds backwards. When you are broke, you obsess over every single purchase. Leto, name brand cereal versus the generic version.
Is it worth spending $3 on coffee when you could make it at home for much less? Should I get premium gas or regular? These decisions consume enormous mental energy when every dollar feels precious. But when you have a solid financial foundation, you realize these micro decisions are largely irrelevant. The difference between $3 coffee and homemade coffee is maybe $1,000 per year if you really overdo it.
That is not nothing, but it is not going to make or break your entire financial future either.
What actually matters are the big decisions. Road, where you live, what you drive, how much you save. These big choices can swing your net worth by tens of thousands of dollars over meaningful time periods. So instead of agonizing over organic bananas, you focus energy on optimizing your housing costs strategically.
You focus on maximizing your income and making sure your investment strategy is as solid as possible.
This shift in focus is incredibly liberating because it frees mental bandwidth for decisions that actually matter.
You stop sweating the small stuff entirely and start thinking strategically about building real, long-term wealth.
Now let us talk about what happens to your career once you hit this $20,000 milestone. Having $20,000 saved does not just change your relationship with money and Perez, it transforms your relationship with work. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, you are essentially trapped in whatever job you currently have. Your boss could be terrible, your coworkers toxic, the work mind-numbing canceled, but you cannot afford to leave.
This puts you in an incredibly weak negotiating position, where you desperately need the job more than they do.
You cannot ask for a raise because you are afraid they might fire you for even asking. You cannot push back on unreasonable demands because you need the job so much more than they need you.
You cannot explore other opportunities because taking time off for interviews feels financially way too risky.
You are stuck, and everyone around you knows it. Trapped in financial desperation at work. But $20,000 changes the entire dynamic, and suddenly you have what I call walking away money.
You could quit tomorrow and survive for months while you find something significantly better than what you have.
This does not mean you should be reckless or burn bridges unnecessarily prey, but you negotiate from strength now.
This psychological shift affects everything about how you actually approach your career going forward from here.
You start asking for the raise you genuinely deserve, because the worst they can say is simply no.
You push back on unreasonable requests because you are simply no longer afraid of the consequences.
You explore new opportunities freely because you can actually afford to take some reasonable, calculated risks now.
Here is what is really crazy. Often, you do not even need to actually use your walking away money. Just having that security changes your entire demeanor at work. And you become more confident and more assertive. You become more willing to take on challenging projects, and people at work absolutely notice this change.
When you show up differently at work, people notice that. Suddenly you get better assignments and more recognition. And yes, you start getting more money at work because of the confidence that $20,000 created.
It is like having a secret superpower that you hope you will never actually have to use.
But just knowing it is there completely changes everything about how you operate every single day.
The more confident and successful you become at work, the faster you build wealth and create even more options.
It is a positive feedback loop that accelerates over time. and truly compounds, just like your investments do.
But here is where most people mess this up completely, clicks. And I see it happen constantly. They finally hit $20,000, feel that psychological shift, and then immediately blow it on something stupid.
Maybe they decide they deserve a brand new car since they have been so disciplined saving up.
Or they take a very expensive vacation because they feel like they have truly earned some reward.
Or they use it as a down payment on a house they simply cannot really afford right now.
Do not do this. That $20,000 is not a reward for your good financial behavior. It is the very foundation of your entire financial future, Brilliant. Treat it like the irreplaceable seed it is.
It is the seed that grows into generational wealth if you are patient enough to let it compound.
And this next part will probably make you laugh or cry, depending entirely on your current financial situation.
The average person spends more money on their car over their lifetime than it takes to achieve financial independence.
Between car payments, insurance, maintenance, and gas, most people drop $600 to $800 monthly. Over a 40-year period, that is easily $400,000 or more just to get around. Meanwhile, these same people are complaining they simply cannot afford to save anything for retirement. It is like spending a fortune on a gym membership you never use, while complaining you cannot eat healthy.
The moment you drive a brand new car off the lot, it loses about 20% of its value instantly.
So you are not just spending money on a new car three-step. You are actively and immediately destroying wealth.
Compare that to investing the same amount in a diversified portfolio today. Instead of evaporating, your money multiplies. Cars are emotional purchases, Nietzsche. You want reliability. You want to look good. You want to feel successful. And there is nothing wrong with that, as long as you truly understand what you are actually trading off. That car payment might genuinely make you feel wealthy, Aprelsens, but it is actually keeping you financially poor. Having $20,000 saved completely changes your perspective on major purchases through the lens of opportunity cost. Instead of asking, "Can I afford the monthly payment?" you ask, "What is this really costing me in opportunity?" That $30,000 car is not just $30,000, but it is $200,000 in future growth. $30,000 invested could grow to over $200,000 in your investment account over 20 years. Suddenly, driving a reliable used car does not feel like a sacrifice. It feels like a strategic wealth choice.
The beautiful irony is the person in the flashy new car is stressed about money, while the Honda driver builds wealth.
The Honda driver is quietly building wealth and sleeping far better at night than the new car person.
This mindset shift now extends to every single major financial decision you make, including housing, education, vacations, and hobbies.
Everything gets filtered through the lens of opportunity cost. Not obsessively, but in a genuinely strategic way.
This ensures you are making truly intentional choices about exactly where your money goes at all times. Once you start thinking this way, you often realize you do not actually want half the stuff you thought you did. That bigger apartment tickling, the extra space would be nice, but is it worth delaying financial independence by 5 years? That expensive hobby 3, it is fun, but there are probably cheaper ways to get the very same satisfaction. This is not about becoming a penny-pinching miser who never enjoys anything in life ever again. It is about becoming genuinely intentional with your money, instead of letting it slip away thoughtlessly on autopilot. When you have clear financial goals and understand compound interest, it gets much easier to know what you really want. You distinguish far more easily between what you think you want in the moment and what you truly want.
Look, listen, $20,000 is not going to make you rich overnight. Let us be completely honest about that. But $20,000 will fundamentally change how you think about money and opportunity from this point forward.
It is the real difference between just surviving and genuinely thriving in your financial life.
It is the real difference between reacting to whatever life throws at you and deliberately designing your own life.
Start building that $20,000 foundation today, because your future self is counting on the decision you make right now. Trust me, your future self will absolutely thank you for every decision you make, starting right now, today.